Let's talk some football recruiting. We haven't hit that in a while. Let's talk some big time visitors on campus, plus the 24 and 25 high school players. How have their seasons started? Who's off to a blazing start? Locked on Badgers, let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Really do appreciate every single person tuning in and giving us a small part of your day. It is incredibly humbling. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's get into it. We haven't hit recruiting in a minute. When the games start, there's so much action around it, but recruiting remains the lifeblood of the program. We know this. Let's talk some of the big visitors that stood out to me from week one. Buffalo, going through Twitter, a few other places. There's you can find who's coming to campus for the most part. The big ones I want to hit on is there's a trio of in-state players coming to campus that were on campus for the Buffalo game. I want to start with Owen Strebig, the 6'8", 280-pound, 290-pound offensive tackle from Catholic Memorial. Listen, he is a Notre Dame lean. We've talked about this. He's been on Notre Dame's campus 3 times. The very likely consensus top overall prospect in the state of Wisconsin. And it sets up a narrative, is what Wisconsin once again going to lose, the top of the in-state class to someone else, be it. We've seen that in recent years, right? With that Carson Hinsman going to Ohio State, Billy Schrauth going to Notre Dame. This last cycle we certainly saw with Sexton and Harbor, Corey Smith, kind of going to other places. And then are we going to see in 25 Owen Strebig go to Notre Dame? Probably, to be honest. I've been told off the record that Notre Dame is going to be incredibly hard for Wisconsin to beat, but they're still in the game, right? It's not over. They had them on campus. The interesting thing, and I think some Badger fans know this, not all Badger fans know this. Who's the offensive line coach at Notre Dame? It's Joe Rudolph, right? Former longtime Badger, obviously. And what was one thing that Joe Rudolph could always do that was never in question? Recruit. Yeah, you look at the guys he landed at Wisconsin. Players love him. Families love him. He is an incredible recruiter. And there's a lot to sell at Notre Dame. So this is a quote from Owen Strebig. I first heard from Coach Rudolph when I was a freshman, and he was at Wisconsin. Strebig said, then obviously went to Virginia Tech, but our relationship kicked back up this winter. He is such a great person and an excellent coach. Everyone just thinks so highly of him. Again, Strebig's been to Notre Dame 3 times. He's going back September 23rd. They have a big game against Ohio, or against, let's see, I think is that Ohio State? I'm trying to remember. He's going back to Notre Dame the 23rd. I mean, it was great to see him come back on campus. It doesn't sound like any decisions are imminent, but that's going to be a tough pull. Let's go to Cooper Catalano, linebacker from Germantown, 6'2", 210 pounds. Offers already from Michigan State, Illinois, Kansas is in on him, Minnesota. I really liked his film. I was digging into Cooper Catalano, watching the film, 6'2". He looks a little bigger than that even. Like he has a big frame, long arms. It looks like he put on 20, 30 pounds and still move pretty well. So you're probably looking at a guy in college who's going to end up 6'2", 230, 6'2", 235, somewhere in that range. And he moves really well. His huddle film has him listed as a 4'7", 40 guy. Definitely a player I think could tick up on that. Plays well in coverage. They use him a lot underneath, running with crossers in the flat, really good tackler. I liked his film quite a bit. He looks like a player Wisconsin that's going to be able to play at Wisconsin, going to fit into that linebacker pedigree they've had for a long time. I like the film. I think he's going to play. The athleticism plays up a little bit. And I think, again, the frame there's a lot of upside. I think he has the ability to get bigger. And he showed versatility, the ability to come downhill, good tackler, but a lot of clips of him in space, running from sideline to sideline, tracking down kind of a swing pass in the boundary, showing some zone awareness, putting the foot in the dirt, coming downhill. I liked Cooper Catalano in the film, so I'm interested there. He was on campus. And then we talked about Michael Roeske, 6'7", 270, 280 pound offensive tackle from Watoma. We talked about him a couple shows ago with Brian Smith. He was on campus. He's really, really impressive physically when you see him. One of the things that Brian Smith talked about is you need to see him play with a little more aggression, right, to just really bury people. But physically, he's a guy that really looks the part. He's 6'7" already. He carries his 270 really well. We've talked about that. He's going to be able to put on some weight. He moves really well for a big kid already. It's not lumbering. It's a fluid athletic movement that portends to a tackle position at the Power 5 level. I think there's a lot of upside there. He's a little lost actually in Strebig's shadow because people have been talking about Owen Strebig for so long. Now Strebig's a little bigger. He's a little more filled out already. You don't have to project as much, but Roeske's going to be able to carry the weight. He looks really good. And to me, it's similar to this year's cycle, the 24 cycle, where everybody was so high on Donovan Harbor. But I looked at a guy like Garrett Sexton. I'm like, I kind of like him better. And I'm not saying I like Roeske better than Owen Strebig. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that Roeske is a little lost in the hype of Owen Strebig. I think Roeske's a really good prospect. Right now, he's a high 3-star guy. I would be thrilled to get him in this class. I think that's probably going to happen at some point. He was on campus as well. An interesting safety, Tyron Steed. He put this on Twitter, came to campus. 6'2", 270 pounds, out of St. Louis, Missouri, offers from West Virginia. Ole Miss is in on him, Kansas State, so he's got some SEC interest and offers already. Another guy, you watch the film on Tyler Steed, the 6'2" safety out of Missouri. Big, long kid, right? It fits. One of the reasons I want, and this isn't a comprehensive list of everybody that was on campus, but I wanted to talk about Tyler because he just fits, again, that mold. He looks like Remington Moss in the 25 class. He's not as filled out as Remington Moss, but he fits that Fickell Tressel mold of big, long, athletic, fluid defensive backs, right? A couple clips of him playing in the box, a clip of him releasing deep in kind of a deep center field type of a role in high school. It looks like he has some positional flexibility, whether it's kind of a big corner, a safety. I think he's probably more of a safety, but he's pretty fluid. He moves pretty well, which I really like. So interesting player there. It was nice to see him get on campus. And then a bunch of committed players are on campus. Rafael Dunn, and most of these are in the 24 class. KBJ, Kyan Barry Johnson. Darian Dupree was on campus, which is pretty important considering he's, those running backs are both kind of going to be hot commodities as teams try to pry, a crowbar one of them out of this class from the Badgers because it's going to be tough to hang on to 3 running backs in this class. Derek Jensen was on campus, the big right tackle in the 24 class. And then I love getting Layden Locke on campus, the 25 quarterback. Obviously, the younger brother of Braden Locke. He has started off, we're going to talk about it in the next segment, but he has started off like gangbusters this year. And it's great to get your quarterback on campus with other players, right? Again, Strebig's going to be a tough pull, but it's great to get him on campus with a committed quarterback in his class. Quarterbacks are they're the center ring of your recruiting circus. They have gravity and they pull other recruits in on like any other position. So I think it's important to get Layden Locke on campus with other uncommitted recruits. So that's kind of a brief overview of some of the visitors. Again, it's not a comprehensive list, but it is some of the players that interest me, some in-state players, and then a couple of the committed players, which I think is always important as well. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Come back. We're going to talk about a new segment. We're going to go down on the farm, right? And how are the committed prospects, their high school seasons going? Who's kind of rising in that stock? Who's maybe struggling a little bit? We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's episode brought to you by our good friends over at LinkedIn. Over at LinkedIn. And, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's something I've used personally to maintain my professional network. It's something my company uses. It's a huge professional marketing tool, and there's a reason so many successful companies and successful people and successful hiring managers use it. Simple tools, screening questions, make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview, who you'd like to hire. Don't waste time with people who shouldn't be coming into that room. Don't waste their time or your time. It's why small businesses continue to rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the show. Really do appreciate it. Let's just keep talking. Let's keep going. I wanted to talk a little bit about prospects. Again, I'm going to call this segment Down on the Farm, right? Because I'm a big baseball guy. And in baseball, your farm system, right, is your pipeline of talent. And you'll go down on the farm and pull a pitcher out of AA, a third baseman out of AAA. You get super excited about the ball player down in single A with the 98-mile-an-hour fastball who has no idea where the pitch is going, right? And it's that kind of same idea. Recruiting is much like the farm system in baseball. Recruiting is your pipeline for college talent. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on down at the farm. Which players in the 24 and the 25 class have impressed so far with their high school seasons. I want to start here. Anelu Lafayette, who I recently put on Discord. A question was posed: who are your 5 favorite recruits in the 24 class? Let me see if I can actually pull that up quick if I have it. But long story short, as I try to pull that up, Anelu Lafayette is one of my 5, right? So here was my 5 and this isn't even a topic I was getting into, but I just want to kind of use this to kick off my Lafayette discussion. My top 5 right now, and this is subject to change, favorite recruits in the 24 class. I have Xavier Lucas, Emilio Agard, Darian Dupree, Dillon Jones, and Anelu Lafayette. Okay, that's where I'm at with my top 5. Let me know in the comments right now, who are your top 5 favorite recruits in the 24 class that have verbally committed to the Badgers? And again, my 5 are Lucas, Agard, Dupree, Jones, and Lafayette. So, Anelu Lafayette has posted some highlights already. His season has gotten underway. He looks explosive. He looks as advertised. And he's a guy, when I was talking to Brian Smith, and we've talked about this, there's a difference between having to scheme up pressure or just having a guy who can beat their best player, right? And then they have to scheme up protections to stop him, and that opens up things for your other defenders. And Lafayette is one of the guys who can be a scheme buster, right? He can destroy protections. He can cause issues on the edge. He can beat their best player athletically. That's why he's such an important get in that 24 class. He gives the Badgers somebody who, again, recruiting is all projection and there's no guarantees. We all understand this, but he potentially gives you a guy who you can put on the football field and say, he's just going to beat your best blocker, and you're going to have to account for him in other ways. And then we'll use other schemes to get our other guys going. So he's a big deal to me in this class, and he's looked as advertised. Explosive off the edge, showing a little bit more, tools, a little more toolsy on the pass rush. He had a really nice spin move in one of the clips, but there's so many clips where he's just too fast, too quick, too explosive off the edge. He's going to be a handful. So it was nice to see some of the early clips from his senior season matching internally what I thought he is as a player. Again, much more to come, but this is kind of a snapshot on some of the players that I found interesting, going back and looking at some of the highlights they posted, some of their Twitter, some of the stats. So Anelu Lafayette to me is a very interesting one. Gideon Ituka, go get some. Long regarded as kind of the second-class citizen of this running back class by a lot of people, not by me, right? I got receipts on this. When we talked about Gideon Ituka, I said, I like this. I like this get. When it happened, if you remember, he was the second running back in the class, and people said, I don't know, why would you take this guy and potentially lose out on a high-rated guy? I said, I don't know. I kind of like Ituka. I like his feel. I like his ability to be a little different. I like that he can run between the tackles really fluidly. Ituka, his last game, 13 carries, 234 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Let me repeat that. 13 carries, 254, and 5 touchdowns. He's a good player. Again, he doesn't have the highest ceiling, right? When you look at Dupree and Jones, though, there's a reason those 2 players are a little more sought after and a little more highly ranked. But Ituka is really solid, and I think he's a really good running back recruit. So it's interesting to see him go off, get 254 in a game. KBG, Kyne Johnson's off to a hot start, 3 total touchdowns in 2 games. Jake Kokorowski put some clips of him up on his Twitter. I encourage you to go check that out. Dillon Jones, the clips that have been floating around with Dillon Jones, he looks every bit the part of that 4-star workhorse interior between the tackles running back to start his senior season. Again, I talked to Dillon Jones, head coach. He was on the show, and he talked about just how good he is, how physical and how fluid. Dillon Jones, a guy that we had Again, Brian Smith on the show said Dillon Jones could play for anybody. He could play for Alabama. He is that type of running back, and he looks great to start this season. Really impressive clips, running physically between the tackles, breaking through arm tackles, carrying defenders. He's really good. Dillon Jones has looked very impressive to start of the season. Really nice clips from both Xavier Lucas. John Garcia Jr. posted a clip of Xavier Lucas, the American Heritage cornerback out of Florida, having a really nice interception along the sideline. And then there's a clip of Emilio Agard floating around with a one-handed interception as well. Again, two of my favorite recruits in this class. There is a punt return from Jay Harper Jr. for a touchdown. So all the defensive backs really showing a lot of athleticism and explosiveness. Braden Locke continuing the good news train here, or not Braden, sorry, Landon Locke, the 25 commit. His last game, 19 of 28, 406 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's been on fire. He's got 7 touchdowns and no interceptions on the year, I believe. He is the quarterback that Phil Longo went out in the 25 class and said, yeah, we like what we see here. And the other thing I've talked about with Landon Locke that to me is really interesting is recruiting Braden Locke, the older brother of Landon. They know the family, right? So I think the intangibles box they feel pretty good about already, because I think they know the type of cloth that Landon Locke is cut out of, because they've already learned that with Braden, right? They already kind of know what kind of kid, what kind of character. They'll have insight into Landon that very few programs will have, because they can talk to his older brother about him. They can talk to the parents about him. They're going to get more insight into the psyche and kind of the mental makeup of Landon Locke than just about any other program. So I'm very confident in that pick. It feels like that's a guy that they feel really good about to secure that quarterback this early in the process. And the early results have been really, really good for Landon Locke. On the downside, again, this is all early, right? And it's important to track this stuff just to kind of get a feel. Mabrey Mettauer hasn't had the best start to the season. The 24 quarterback commit. His team's 0-2. His last game, he was 11 of 22 for 103 yards. Not much on the ground, which is interesting given his physical tools. Certainly a player who has the athletic ability to churn up some yards on the ground. So, listen, am I concerned about this? Not really, because every person I've talked to, I've talked to Mabrey's dad. I've talked to John Garcia Jr. about Mabrey. I've talked to Brian Smith about Mabrey. I've talked to John McNamara about Mabrey. Like, every person I've talked to has said it's the little things, right? It's the consistency. All the tools are there. All the arm strength, the size, all the tools are there. He just needs to build awareness with how you need to feather a ball into coverage, when you need to take something off, about feel. And it looks like he's just still working on the feel, but there's a lot of time for him, right? And it doesn't have to happen right away. And you go and get players with that type of considerable upside, because if he does put everything together, he's going to be a monster. And those type of players can be program changers. They can be ceiling lifters. And that's why you go after them. But it's also why you continue to stack other talent. You're not getting Mabrey Mettauer and saying, all right, we're good for the next 4 years. No, in 25, you then go get Landon Locke, right? You still have Evers. You still have LaCrue. You still have Braden Locke. Mettauer is a lottery ticket with a massive payoff if it hits, and you add that into the room every time. But the start of the season, there's no sugarcoating, I don't think has been what people had hoped or expected. So anyway, that's kind of my initial thoughts. Dillon Johnson, the nose tackle out of Illinois, had a game with a couple sacks as well. I have a good feeling on him. I think that's a player that could continue to progress. So some really nice things down on the farm for the recruiting pipeline at Wisconsin. Coming up, we're going to take a quick break for the show. Coming up, we're going to talk early depth chart thoughts. Look at snap counts. Have some spots on the depth chart kind of been, I don't want to say finalized, but kind of started to settle into where they're going to be this year. Let's talk about the depth chart coming up on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for the show from our good friends over at Game Time. Game Time has taken all the stress out of buying tickets. We're all sports fans. We like to be entertained, and you need tickets to be entertained. Game Time is America's #1 ticket app. Take all the stress out of buying tickets. You don't have to plan months in advance anymore. There are incredible flash sales on Game Time. You get the best tickets guaranteed. You get pictures of the seats, so you know exactly what it's going to look like when you're there. And again, this takes all the stress and all the pain and all the worry about the logistics of doing it. And it's not just sports. Theaters, comedy shows, whatever you want. Game Time has your tickets for the events you want to get to. And as I mentioned, exclusive flash deals for tickets to get the best prices. Plus, the game time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's why it's the fastest growing ticket app on the marketplace. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. It's simple. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Just like that. Who couldn't use a free $20? Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I want to thank everybody again for tuning in. Really do appreciate everybody. If you have a second, go check us out on Discord. Go look at the Discord. It's a great place just to chop it up with other Badger fans. It's no politics, no Gophers. I'll put the link. It's free. I'll put the link to Discord in the show when I release this tomorrow. I think you'll like it. And there's a lot of non-Badger content in there. If you want to just talk about hunting and fishing, food, beer, video games, sports cards with other Badger fans, Discord is the place to go. Locked On Badgers Discord community is a ton of fun. All right, let's talk this. Let's look at some early depth chart thoughts. Snap counts from Pro Football Focus. I have a subscription there, so I'm kind of able to see, and I'll continue to release. I'll do a better job of releasing some insight from that as well. Let's start with Jackson Acker. We've talked a lot about who that third guy is. I think as camp wound down, we all kind of thought it would be Jackson, but that's kind of been confirmed. He came in and got 6 carries at the end of the game. It looks like K.D. Ekamele wasn't able to overcome him for that role. A top 5 at receiver, right? It looks like our top 5 at the receiving position emerged. You've got Dike, you've got Sky Bell, CJ Williams, Bryson Green, and Will Pauling. It looks like Keontae that's kind of the top 5. And then there's a big drop off for Keontae Lewis. So that's interesting. It's interesting to me for all the talk about who's receiver 1 this year. Is it going to be Bryson? Is it going to be potentially CJ? Is he eventually going to take over that role? Is it going to be DK? DK led the receiving group by quite a bit with 60 snaps. I think Bryson Green was second in the 40s. That's interesting. It sounds like DK, again, and this doesn't really surprise me that much. I think I had Bryson as my guy who I thought would probably end up being receiver 1, but DK is the most polished. Like, he can do just about anything you need from a receiver, right? He can run routes out of the slant. He can run routes in the boundary. He can go deep. He's got enough size to be a blocker. He's got enough speed to be a vertical threat. He's got the hands and toughness to be a issue for defensive players on 3rd and 5. If you need to throw him a slant inside, he's going to make the catch. He's going to run the right route. He's going to take the hit. He's going to hold on to it. He checks so many boxes. So it doesn't really surprise me that DK is at the top of that snap chart. Joe Huber. Let's talk about underrated transfer pickups, right? We talked in wax poetically about the quarterbacks, about Bryson Green, about Jake Renfro, about Darian Varner, Jason Maitre. Probably not enough hype on Joe Huber, who ended up playing 64 snaps and had a 68 grade on Pro Football Focus, which is pretty good. But again, it's the snaps, it's the versatility. He can play guard. He can play in an emergency. You could probably play Huber just about anywhere on the line. But a really good, versatile player, looks solid, and clearly there's a reason why this coaching staff wanted to bring him from Cincinnati. So that was nice to see. Interesting one here. Ben Barton kind of emerges on the defense line. We talked about Barton in our post-game rewatch a little bit, but he finished with 23 snaps. I don't think I saw that coming before the season. Now, some of this is related to TJ Bowler's not playing, to Darian Varner not playing. Those players get back. You probably see Barton's snaps cut down. But good on him, like stepping up and filling that gap. I thought he was okay, but you need the depth and you need the reps, and he was able to go in there and acquit himself pretty well. 43 snaps each from Cheney and Turner, inside linebackers. We talked about the idea of having 3 starters right there at that inside linebacker rotation. Muma led the way, and then Cheney and Turner identical. Each had 43 snaps. I think Cheney's going to continue to build on this role. Now, obviously, next game is going to be a little weird because Turner has to miss the first half due to that targeting penalty, which I don't like. It is what it is, but I think going forward, you're going to continue to see Cheney build on that and probably continue to add snaps into his war chest there. And then Ricardo Holman, finish here. Ricardo Holman led the cornerbacks in Pro Football Focus grade at 70 and also snaps at 71. Not many people would have seen that coming. I didn't call that. So that's an interesting thing, for still a young player. So it's good for his trajectory. It's good for the future of the program to see him start really excelling in that role. It's also surprising, right? So it was surprising to see Alexander Smith not really in more of a rotation with Nazir Forkran. It's surprising. It's definitely something to track for Washington State as a team that's going to test us in the secondary. So anyway, those are some early thoughts on the depth chart snap counts on Wisconsin. Bunch more content coming up. Really appreciate y'all, and let's talk tomorrow.